Get smarter and bring in our lead-off panel. MS Now's Inez de la Cuartera, who is in Turkey at the summit. Luke Broadwater, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House correspondent for the New York Times. Leanne Caldwell, chief correspondent for Puck. And Alex Ward, national security reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Inez, I don't know, what I just saw sounded like Helsinki 2. The president appears to be embracing Erdogan and, again, trashing our NATO allies. What did you hear?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there's been a lot of shock here from NATO allies, you know, looking at the president's rhetoric. We heard time and time again President Trump lashing out at NATO allies for not doing enough to support the U.S. in its war with Iran. We had heard that in the lead up to the summit. We heard it last night. We heard it again today. He very much singled out Italy, the U.K., Spain today, really lashing out at Spain, saying that the U.S. would completely stop all trade with Spain. Worth pointing out, he's made those threats before, hasn't actually acted on them, but really remarkable comments there from the president. He's also been calling for NATO allies to do more to ramp up their defense spending. That was a big win for him last year, getting NATO allies to commit to spending 5% of their GDP on defense by 2035. And this year at the summit, there's been really an effort, to try and show President Trump that allies are on track to do just that. But he has voiced frustration with that again, earlier today, saying that he feels the U.S. is being mistreated because the U.S. spends more than any other ally. And on the flip side, like you say, we're hearing him praise Erdogan. He has also praised China. Just there sitting next to the Ukrainian president, talked about Putin and how Putin hadn't been so bad when it comes to, his communication with him. So very unusual there. On Ukraine, I will say this was a summit that was supposed to be focused on Ukraine. And there is frustration amongst NATO allies that, there's been all these kind of distractions, certainly everything going on with Iran. You can't say that's a distraction, but Greenland, very much something that's back in the spotlight that NATO allies are frustrated with. They were hoping to talk about Ukraine, and yet President Trump, once again, talking about Greenland, how Greenland should be controlled by the U.S. and not by Denmark. The Danish prime minister earlier today having to come out to once again say that Greenland is not for sale and that Denmark would be defending every inch of Danish territory.
Inez, thank you. Alex Ward, let's just go around the horn. I want to get your reaction to the president's remarks there. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of the same, right? I mean, he's been trashing allies for not helping in the Iran operation that he launched, even though he told allies he didn't need them initially, that it was some sort of test, but that was an after-the-fact explanation. Actually, the news that really stuck out to me today was the president basically siding with Ukraine, actually. As much as he's been upset about NATO, he seemed to be pretty pro-Ukraine today, to say that the U.S. would allow these licenses for, to produce Patriot missiles or air defense missiles in Ukraine. That would take some time, but that is a pretty big development. And I believe it's only Germany and Japan that have a similar arrangement. You heard Secretary of State Rubio kind of hint that the U.S. was helping Ukraine with the deeper strikes into Russia. You heard Trump even say he would go to Ukraine, although after the war. I mean, this is a friendlier tone that Trump has struck with Ukraine on Ukraine for quite some time. Now, granted, he often has praise for Ukraine and then reverts to the mean, in which he seems to want a better relationship with Russia, and that usually sidelines Ukraine. But for now, a sort of mixed messaging, right? NATO bad, Ukraine good. It's a flip from what this was about this time last year.
Luke, what was your takeaway?
Yeah, I think a lot of the European countries came into this NATO meeting hoping for like a nice low drama family dinner, and that Donald Trump came in and just like tipped over the table. He bashed Spain repeatedly. He made menacing comments about Greenland. He attacked Italy, Germany, France, the UK. And then I just heard him, I think, make more threats of potential war crimes in Iran, bombing desalinization plants and civilian infrastructure. So this is, really extraordinary stuff. It isn't stuff that's necessarily new, but when you look at it in the big picture, to see America be so bellicose right in the face of our European allies is quite extraordinary.
Not new. And again, the president is pushing falsehoods. When criticizing the Obama deal, the JCPOA, the president, he did it there and he cited it before. He cites $1.7 billion paid in cash to Iran. He characterizes it as though it was ransom paid to release hostages. That is a characterization that is absolutely false. But again, Leanne, we hear the president saying that. What stuck out to you?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Iran, because I was really paying attention to what he was saying in Iran about Iran. You know, before this press conference and even during, he said that he's done negotiating with Iran, that the ceasefire is over. But in the very next breath, he said that his negotiators, Steve Witkoff, et cetera, can continue to negotiate if they want. So while he is trying to sound really tough, like he has done, like perhaps some sort of heavy strikes will resume, he's also at the same time saying that these negotiations will actually continue. And so again, it is also a lot of mixed messages. He every day compares himself to that JCPOA with President Obama and that agreement. And there is not much difference between what he's talking about in some sort of deal or MOU or framework, or however you want to frame these negotiations now than with what was happening in 2015. So you just have to take a step back and remember that he started this war, and the status quo from before the war is exactly the same, if not worse, Steph.
Alex, there are some hawks on the right that actually sort of want this thing opened back up and want him to go in and finish the job, arguing that what was the point of doing all of this if we get nothing, or we're even worse than we were 12 weeks ago?
I still don't have a good definition for what finish the job means. I mean, it sounds like a euphemism for get rid of this regime and replace it with something. But this is the president who doesn't want to commit to regime change, right? I mean, to do that, it would require U.S. troops on the ground. It would require a massive operation that he's not willing to do. So what does finish the job mean? I still don't have a good answer. When I talk to Hawks about this, they basically say, just hit Iran harder and see what happens. And the see what happens is an odd one. I mean, this has been the strategic question this entire time, right? If your main goal, if you're President Trump, was to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, you could totally take Operation Midnight Hammer as a step in that direction, right? Because you've destroyed those nuclear facilities. But if now your goal is still to somehow keep this commitment, then why are they hitting all of these other sites, right? What are they trying to do? Just to sort of force Iran to give up the nuclear program? They haven't yet. They're not even willing to make like a deal or abide by an interim deal. So what is the evidence that sort of more bombing is going to lead to the current Iranian leadership to go, oh, okay, never mind, we're going to dismantle this multi-decade program? It just doesn't make much sense to me. I don't know what the strategy here is. The only thing we hear, as you noted, is finish the job, but that really just feels like just hit them. But to what end? No one's really articulated that yet. Because if the president is right that Iran somehow said they committed to giving up the nuclear program, then what are we doing here?